Hello and welcome back to the channel. In the previous issue, we discussed that on November 11, 1918, Germany officially signed a ceasefire agreement, marking the end of the 4-year First World War. But the war is ended and the problem is far from resolved. How should the defeated country handle it? How should the post-war world be reshuffled? Who will lead the new international order? With these questions in mind, on January 18, 1919, the victorious countries gathered at the Palace of Versailles in Paris, France, and held the historic Paris Peace Conference. On the surface, there were 27 countries and thousands of representatives attending the conference, with a grand scene and everyone having the right to speak. In fact, the entire peace conference was firmly held in the hands of 3 people from beginning to end, known as the Paris Peace Conference Big Three: French Prime Minister Clemenceau, British Prime Minister Lloyd George, and US President Wilson. What's even more interesting is that these 3 people not only have completely different goals, but could even be said to have dismantled each other and had ulterior motives from the beginning. The 6-month negotiation was essentially a tug-of-war between these 3 old foxes. Let's talk one by one. The first one is French Prime Minister Clemenceau, nicknamed the Tiger Prime Minister. His goal is very pure and firm: revenge, to weaken Germany to the death. Clemenceau personally witnessed the failure of the Franco-Prussian War and watched France cede Alsace-Lorraine. In this war, the French mainland was turned into scorched earth, with millions of young people dying in the trenches and the entire country's economy almost collapsing. In his eyes, Germany is France's century-old arch enemy, and this time it must be completely defeated so that it will never have the ability to threaten France again. Simply put, it means not only to win, but also to make the opponent unable to stand up again. The second one is British Prime Minister Lloyd George, a typical pragmatic politician who is skilled in calculation. His position is very contradictory. On the one hand, the British public is calling for severe punishment of Germany and making Germany pay the price. He must cater to public opinion. On the other hand, he is aware that the European continent cannot be without balance. If Germany is really completely destroyed, France will dominate alone, which is not in line with Britain's national policy of continental balance of power for hundreds of years. Moreover, Germany is still an important trading partner of the UK, and making Germany poor would not benefit the UK's business. So the operation of Lloyd George is like a mixture of 2 sides. On the surface, he supports severe punishment of Germany, but secretly, he constantly blocks France's extreme demands and tries his best to give Germany a breath. The third one, US President Wilson, is more like an idealistic outsider compared to the first 2. Before the end of the war, Wilson put forward the famous 14 Principles, which centered on opposing secret diplomacy, advocating national self-determination, establishing an international alliance, and creating a fair and just post-war new order. It sounds great, but Wilson's real goal was to use this opportunity to push the United States to the position of world leader and use the League of Nations to lead global affairs. But the problem is that the old European powers simply don't eat this trick. In the eyes of Clemenceau and Lloyd George, Wilson was a bookworm who didn't understand European politics. You talk about your fairness and justice, and we count it as our territorial compensation. We can't even talk about it. So, the 3 of them argued in the Palace of Versailles for a whole 6 months. France seeks revenge, Britain seeks balance, and the United States seeks dominance. The 3 parties compromise and trade with each other, sacrificing the interests of defeated and weak countries. Saying the victorious country. China wanted to regain its rights in Shandong, but it was directly handed over to Japan, which is the most authentic epitome of this spoils sharing conference. September 28, 1919, in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, German representatives were forced to sign the treaty. They had no right to negotiate. If they don't sign, the Allied powers will immediately restart a war and invade Germany. In the end, the Germans could only endure humiliation and sign the Treaty of Versailles. How strict is this treaty? Let's sort out the core content and you'll understand why Germans see it as a deep-seated shame. Firstly, on the territory, Alsace-Lorraine is completely returned to France. The Saar coal mine will be handed over to France for 15 years of mining, and a referendum will be held after sovereignty is established. The west bank of the Rhine was occupied by Allied forces for 15 years, and within a 50-kilometre radius of the east bank, Germany was not allowed to station troops or build defensive fortifications, which was equivalent to opening the Western Gate directly. In addition, Germany also ceded territory to Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Denmark, losing a total of 1/7 of its territory and 1/10 of its population. Secondly, militarily, the German army was reduced to a maximum of 100,000 soldiers, prohibited from possessing tanks, heavy artillery, and gunning in air force. The navy is not allowed to have submarines or build large battleships, equivalent to German navy, which was once the world's second largest, being almost completely abolished. Thirdly, the economy and colonies. All of Germany's overseas colonies were divided among the Victorian countries. At the same time, a huge amount of war reparations had to be paid, with a later finalised total of 132 billion gold marks. What is the concept of this money equivalent to several years of Germany's total national income at that time, even with interest? It would take several decades to repay, equivalent to several generations of Germans having to pay off their debts for this war. So when this treaty was announced, the whole of Germany exploded. Think almost all Germans believe that this is not a peace treaty at all. It is a shameful treaty. Many people do not believe that Germany was defeated on the battlefield, that they believe that it was a domestic traitor who stabbed the country in the back and forced it to accept such harsh conditions. The emotions of hatred, humiliation and dissatisfaction spread throughout Germany and deeply buried in the hearts of every German. And this the hatred became the most fertile soil for Hitler and the Nazi Party to come to power in the future. Of course, in addition to the Treaty of Versailles against Germany, the victorious countries also signed a series of treaties with Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire. Under this set of treaties, the map of Europe was completely redrawn. The former German Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Russian Empire, Ottoman Empire, all four empires collapsed. And a group of new countries such as Poland, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia emerged one after another. It can be said that the political map of Europe we see today is basically the embryonic form laid at this time. In addition, the Paris Peace Conference also finalised a major event, the establishment of the League of Nations. This is the first global international organisation in human history with the original intention of mediating national conflicts and maintaining world peace, which sounds very epoch-making. But ironically, the United States, which first proposed this idea, did not even join the League of Nations in the end. The US Congress refused to approve the treaty, and Wilson's idealism completely collapsed. Without the participation of the United States and without real coercive power, the League of Nations was an empty shell from the beginning, unable to stop its later war ambitions. At this point, we can also provide a final summary of the First World War. The damage caused to humanity by this 4-year catastrophe is incalculable. Over 16 million people have died, 20 million have been injured, and direct and indirect economic losses have exceeded $300 billion. Countless cities, villages, factories and railways have been reduced to ruins, and an entire generation of young Europeans have been almost completely consumed by war. But the changes it brings are also earth-shattering. The collapse of the 4 major empires brought an end to the old European order that had lasted for hundreds of years. The victory of the October Revolution in Russia marked the birth of the world's first socialist country and opened a new chapter in history. The war also crushed the strength of old imperialism, awakening colonial and semi-colonial peoples around the world and causing waves of national liberation movements to rise higher and higher. Fortunately, World War I did not truly resolve the contradictions between imperialists. The post-war system centered around the Treaty of Versailles, which seemed to bring peace, was actually filled with retaliation and injustice. It did not eliminate hatred, but instead deepened it. It did not resolve the conflict, but instead created more new contradictions. By that time, Marshal Foch of France said an extremely precise sentence after reading the Treaty of Versailles. This is not peace. This is a 20-year truce. History has indeed fulfilled the statement. Only 20 years later, the Second World War broke out and humanity once again fell into a deeper abyss. At this point, our World War I series has officially been fully updated. From the gunshots in Sarajevo to the meat grinder in Verdun, from the clash of steel giant ships in Jutland to the final finale at the Palace of Versailles, we have overcome this human catastrophe that changed the entire 20th century together. History is never a cold year or event. It is the fate of countless people and a lesson worth remembering forever. Only by understanding the cost of war can we truly appreciate the value of peace. Finally, I would like to ask everyone, do you think the Second World War would have erupted without the harsh sanctions of the Treaty of Versailles? Welcome to all. Leave your comments in the comment section. Let's discuss together. If you think this series is done well, please give this video a like and share it with more friends who love history. It is also very meaningful for me to accompany everyone in sorting out this history.